of the Finance Committee of Lisle Community School District 202. First up is public comment. Do we have any blue cards? Anything from the internet?
We don't.
Excellent. One day. All right, the third item on the agenda are the minutes from the September 22nd, 2025 Finance Committee meeting. Does anyone have any questions, changes to those minutes? No? So we're all in agreement that those accurately reflect last month's meeting?
Fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, so item 4 is the facility plan. The information for this can be found in the Finance Committee packet under item 4. Mr. Wilkinson, if you would take it away, please.
All right, thank you. Let's just see if I have to do anything to get it up on the presenter there. I think it'll go there automatically. Perfect. There we go. So our first topic tonight is the updated facility plan. This is probably where we'll spend most of our time this evening. For those of you who've been in the board, as you recall, this looks at our plan kind of over the next 10 years and what the facility needs are in the district. In particular, it kind of breaks out the first 5 years into kind of annual increments so we can start to plan in terms of what projects might fit in where. But then once we get kind of to that 6 to 10 year time frame, they're kind of more lumped together and we don't necessarily slot those into specific years. This is really just for our larger facility projects, anything that's over that $25,000 capitalization threshold. I do note on the building slides throughout the presentation kind of what our overall annual kind of ongoing operations and maintenance costs are for each of the buildings. So that's in there as well. But the presentation really just touches on those larger capital projects that we might have in the coming years. We do update this annually. We note any of the work that we did complete kind of throughout the presentation, and then any potential new projects, as well as on occasion we revise some of the cost estimates kind of based on the current market conditions that we're aware of, and obviously make any changes based on what the district's long-term priorities are. And to start, I will focus really on just kind of the key changes, the key things to know for the presentation. We will touch on kind of briefly some of the building specific items, but I'm not going to go into too much detail on those. That's more of a kind of a reference point for you if you ever want to look back at the presentation, kind of refresh your memory. That's what most of those detailed slides are for. And so the biggest change on this year's facility plan is that at this point we've deferred the rest of the Lisle Junior High renovations, that phase 3 portion, until the summer of 2030. Why the summer of 2030? That's when our district will be debt-free. The existing bonds will roll off. And so that puts us in a position where we can issue new bonds to finance the work. The stuff that we've done so far already, phase 1 and phase 2, realistically was almost $7 million and exhausted those fund balances that we had earmarked for the project. So anything else that needs to be done would have to come from those $13 million of bonds that was discussed when we originally started talking about this project. You will recall that one iteration kind of that financing plan did look at issuing the bonds earlier so that we could realistically just take kind of one summer to pause and then get right back into it. But in order to do that, we'd have to call our existing bonds, and based on where interest rates are currently for bonds, it just doesn't make financial sense to do that. It would be too costly. The bonds that we have right now are at a much lower interest rate, and so issuing those bonds at a higher rate and kind of calling those ones we already have just wouldn't make financial sense. I did get a question kind of related to this deferring of the project. They had a question about the band room at the junior high. The question was, given the growing size of the band, what are the interim plans to address space concerns until the room can be expanded as part of phase 3? And if you recall, when we first looked at the junior high renovations and they were kind of first designed, there were some discussions around enlarging that band room. But as we worked through the process, they were ultimately removed from the final scope that we were considering based on budget limitations. And so I haven't been made aware at this point of any issues in terms of the size or the space. I did reach out to Dave Carney to get some more feedback. Unfortunately, he had a busy day and I wasn't able to get an answer for tonight. But obviously, if that becomes a concern, we'll have to, I guess, sit down with Dave and talk about, do you shift schedules somehow, create some additional spaces where we might be able to have some activity? But that would be something that we would have to work through at that time. So I don't know if you had anything else to add to that. I know it was your question, Dan, but.
No, yeah, no, thank you for the history. I forgot that it had been removed, but it was,
Yeah, we
in one
love
of the
to.
iterations. But, and I just know, having a band kid, there's a lot of kids, and
Okay,
there's 100 students in band, I think, in the fifth grade band right now. And of course, there'll be some attrition, but we have a large group of students coming through. And
Got
I think our directors are very creative, and they've been doing
yeah,
some good rearranging. But I think with this bubble that's coming up, that, it's something that, might want to be looked
Okay.
into. And
Sure.
again, I think that the building staff there have always been creative, and they'll figure something out. So we can't just suddenly, in the middle of the junior high building, make a larger building with,
it would be nice. But
yeah.
at this point, that was something that was a nice to have, but once we kind of got through the process and some of the schematic design, it became apparent it wasn't in the cards for now.
Thanks for recalling that.
I just had a quick, and I like your plan. Would it be better, though, to pursue Dave's plan or the district's plan, I guess, of having more sections, and that way the kids are getting better one-on-one instruction when they're in there too, instead of just expanding the room? Because it wouldn't be an expansion of instructors, right?
I think they're doing some of that right now because they're already at capacity in that room.
Yeah.
So, but I would lend it to the staff and working with the directors on the details. Like, I mean, I'm hearing this kind of secondhand and,
Yeah.
through students. And so, I think it would be, best if we accommodate something in there. But I'm sure it's something that's on Mr. Carney's and
Correct.
the
And so again,
directors.
this is my thought process on brainstorming. Again, I didn't get a chance to talk to Dave about it today, so I don't want to be like, this is Dave Wilkinson's plan. I'm like, you don't want me making plans for what the building's going to be doing. But certainly that's something that, again, I've reached out to Dave. He'll let me know if it is an issue or not an issue. And then obviously, if it's something that needs to be addressed, I would want Dave Carney to
I would
share his thoughts and insights on that.
I think it was a wise approach, Mr. Wilkinson.
Great, thank you.
At the senior high, kind of bullet point number 2 there, I have tentatively scheduled still for the summer of 2028, so it shows up as fiscal year 29. There's always kind of some timing differences between when the work is performed and when we have to pay for it. But I did leave the roofing. This is the roof from 2002, and then the HVAC is really the gymnasium unit that we would like to add air conditioning to at some point. I did leave those in here for now, kind of still in that time frame. But obviously, as we get closer, we will evaluate the condition of the roof before we would move forward, evaluate the condition of the HVAC. We want to do those kind of both at the same time because the unit is there with the roof. But again, those are something that we would explore and continue to take a look at, as well as there are a lot of HVAC units from our 2002 addition over there that we'll have to continue to monitor. So it's kind of a placeholder for now. Again, I think you guys have kind of learned this over the years. Things move around. This is just kind of where we're thinking right now, just to kind of get some ideas for planning. But we did leave that in here for the time being. The other thing is I did adjust the cost estimates for that work based on what it cost us to do the commons units over at the junior high this past summer. I thought that the rooftop unit over there would end up being a little bit more expensive, so that was added to the plan. We're also exploring, or will be exploring, some smaller projects that could be completed potentially, over the next 2 summers. Really in the areas of lighting. One is, I think I've mentioned this before, some of the auditorium lighting, the theater lighting over there at the senior high school. That house lighting uses a lot of energy, and so we think that's a really good opportunity for some energy efficiency, maybe getting some ComEd incentives to pay for that, as well as anytime those lights go out, we have to rent a lift in order to replace them because they're so high. Our lift that we have doesn't reach that high and can't be used in that space. So we're going to explore that, see what those costs might look like. And then also, if possible, we'd like to potentially upgrade the lighting in the hallways at the junior high, and that would probably come with ceiling tiles as well, because once you're up there, you might as well do both at the same time. So we're going to kind of get some idea of what those might cost and potentially bid that out to see if we can make that happen. I don't know if you saw the new ceiling tiles that they had to put in the commons. I mean, they look really good. We've got new ceiling tiles in the classrooms as well, so it might be nice to at least get that piece of the work done as a smaller project while we wait to potentially readdress some of the larger renovation work at the junior high.
Dave, there's some good pictures in the slides. I think it's slide 11 that shows the hallway with the lockers painted and the new ceiling tiles. It looks great. And so I would love to see, if we can make that happen in the other hallways. It really makes a difference. The other thing I noticed is the white paint on those. And, we may at some point want to consider making the foyer a little more inviting and brighter too. And that's dark brick in there, and there's the brown vent cover to the left as you walk in, and it could be something maybe we would consider.
Can you clarify that? When you say white paint,
Well, look, if you look at the halls, above
I
the
get there.
slide 11, I guess is the one. It's brick up on the top, and when I say white, I don't
There we go.
know what it is. But above the lockers, it looks, I think, bright, and it really enhances the appearance there. And we might want to consider something like that in the hallway, just as a thought, because it is dark as you enter, and it looks,
You're
it's
talking
not,
about kind of in the initial entrance?
the
when you go
foyer,
through the foyer.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have a summer painting crew, so we can add that to the list, and that's an easy thing to kind of freshen up.
Well, just for everybody to look at, because it could be a little more inviting, perhaps. I don't,
Okay.
okay.
Let me head back here a little bit, sorry. I did want to mention too, the state maintenance grant came back out, so we'll be looking for a project to utilize those funds, and so some of these lighting and ceiling tile projects could be funded partially by not only the ComEd incentives, but also by the facility grant that the state puts together every year. Wildy Field, we continue to kind of leave that in that 5+ year time frame. That would be renovating the track, the bleachers, the press box. Again, we're kind of postponing that until we kind of sort through our finances and determine if additional funds are available. I did have a board member ask whether the decision to defer that work was related to any possible partnership with the Lisle Park District on a recreation facility. To my knowledge, they haven't reached out to the district about partnering on that in any way, shape, or form. I'm not sure if they've reached out to you, Keith, or not.
They did. They are still in the exploratory stage, but I think what they're proposing is going to be where the old administration used to be, in that workout facility straight across the street from the high school, in between the water park and the high school. So they're looking for, I think, a field house concept there with some indoor basketball and then probably an indoor track. But I don't think we have the financial resources to partner at this point. So I said, we would be glad to be part of those conversations. I think at this point, we don't have the financial resources to finish the junior high renovations. So I don't think we would be able to help them with their field house. But I would imagine we'll have the same relationship we currently have, where they utilize all of our indoor facilities free of charge. And I would hope, if scheduling allows, we'd also be allowed to continue to, if they were able to develop it, be able to use it for our students also.
I just got a question about our press box at Wildy Field, and kind of the condition of that, as well as if maybe some students could kind of do a service project to freshen that up a little bit. I can't remember, I tried to find out. I know when Rich Marks was leading the painting crew, we did have that repainted at one point. I can't remember how many years ago that was at this point, but Jeff's going to take a look closer look at it. If we were going to paint it, we'd have to do that in the summer, and hopefully our painting crew would have a capacity to do that. But he'll also check just to make sure, is there anything we can do with the windows, siding, things like that, make sure we can kind of freshen that up a little bit here within the next year or two. But as far as kind of a student service project for that, really, that would kind of be too dangerous of a work for them. We have to rent a lift in order to do any work on that, and so I would certainly not want to put kids up in a lift that high in the bleachers working on the press box. So
We've got tough sixth graders.
We'll have to tackle that with the professionals in-house when we get the chance in the summer.
No, thank you, and I just, that was for me, at the Decathlon, I had some comments about its condition, and going, we're going to renovate,
Yeah.
future renovations, but with the 5-year plus time frame, if it's not a budget buster to.
So I think Jeff and I would like to hear a little bit more about what exactly they said. I know there's some issues with the kids breaking the handle over there, or the lock or something like that, so they're breaking in, so.
I know the inside is not in great shape, but it's just like the outside,
Yep.
could use a nice
So
coat of
we
paint.
can certainly look into that before the summer of 2030 and at least freshen it up a little bit. And then the other thing is the demolition of Sheezer was postponed a little bit. Obviously, this gives us the flexibility to kind of continue to talk with Chesterton or Sassid, see if they want to extend for a little bit. But, at some point, we may have to demolish Sheezer, and so that's still in the plan, just kind of in the longer-term window at this point. This kind of puts that all together, kind of in the 10-year plan. Again, this is, how these are distributed over time, that kind of evolves from year to year. But in terms of, the first column there, fiscal year 26, we did complete the commons work at the junior high for the HVAC. It also incorporated a new stairway for safety purposes in our auditorium in the theater area. These projects are now complete, and those costs are incorporated here. Looking ahead, I talked already about the high school and kind of that work potentially falling into fiscal year 2029 right there. And then beyond that window, we've got the junior high phase 3 renovation work, which is really kind of the remaining classroom addition, mechanical work, boilers, those kinds of things. Again, we're deferring that work realistically so that we can become debt-free and issue the new bonds at that time. But in total, over the course of this period, including all of those educational enhancements at the junior high, it's about $19.4 million of work. Some of those estimates are from when Perkins and Will did their review. I've tried to update as much as I can based on doing roofing work and past projects, HVAC work. But some of those numbers are still kind of when Perkins and Will did that original assessment. I'm just going to kind of run through the buildings really quick. I don't want to take too much of our time, but focusing on the high school, those red sections up there, I think they're red. I'm not very good with colors, but those are the areas that we would potentially look at doing in 2028. If you recall, we did do some patchwork on those back in 2022, so we'll kind of use that as the baseline as we're evaluating to see how those held up and what that might look like in the next couple of years. I already touched on the South Gym RTU. We'd love to make that air conditioning so we don't have to run those fans in the summers, those big fans in the doorways. But I did update those costs. We initially said maybe $250. I think that would be closer to $500,000 in this day and age. Slide 8 shows the historical. This has mostly been kind of roofing work. We did that in that fiscal year 21 to 23 timeframe. We also did some interior renovations, which was primarily new bleachers in the gymnasium. And then the HVAC work was the main classroom units, the 3 rooftop units that are provide heating and air conditioning for those classrooms. Already talked about kind of what the 10-year time frame looks like. The only thing I didn't mention is kind of that far right-hand column, all of that HVAC work. That would be starting to replace some of those units from our 2002 renovations. Moving to the junior high, we already touched on this slide a little bit, kind of refreshing some of these lights, some of these ceiling tiles, getting some consistency with the work that we've already done. Again, we could hopefully utilize some school maintenance grants to help pay for that, as well as some of those ComEd energy incentives, assuming that they're still out there. These are all the mechanical systems that are still kind of on the radar. Boilers, some of our rooftop units in the smaller areas like the fitness center, the library. We will have to kind of revisit our auditorium. We tried to do that this past summer, but it was more expensive than we anticipated. But those are all also kind of looking ahead things that we will consider. I touched on Wildy Field. Right now, we're kind of in a holding pattern until we figure out the district's finances and what kind of funds would be available for that project. This touches on the history. As I mentioned earlier, you can see there with the renovations, almost $7 million were spent on the renovations in terms of our design work, engineering, architect work, and then actually doing the work over the summer with the windows, the secure vestibule, the 6th grade classrooms. That's all incorporated into this slide. And then we also did all of the unit ventilators in the classroom. So we made a lot of progress. We did a lot more work than I think we originally anticipated in that first 2 phases. But we are kind of in a holding pattern as we figure out what rates are going to do and when we can issue those bonds. I've already touched on this, so moving along to the elementary school, nothing new here, no major capital projects are planned. Again, the building just opened in 2019, so it remains relatively new. We'll continue to monitor kind of the systems and the performance and continue to maintain those, but at this point, we don't have any significant plans at the elementary school within the next 10-year time frame. The last piece, again, you can kind of take a look at this on your own time, but Sheezer Elementary School, currently it's leased out to both Chesterton and Sassid. We'll continue to talk with them to see if that's something they're interested in continuing to do. But at this point, I know we've met as a committee at one point to kind of start to have those discussions about what the community's plans are, what we'd like to do with that space, but right now we have 2 tenants there, and so it's not empty, it's being leased, and it's providing some additional revenue for the district. I know I went through that relatively quick, but we do have some other topics this evening. Are there any other questions or comments? I tried to address those that were submitted over the weekend, over the course of the presentation, but if there's any others, we can certainly open that up for discussion.
Thank you very much for that summary. That was a great presentation. All right, so we are to item 5, the financial projection update. That can be found under item 5 of the Finance Committee packet. And if you would please take the stand again, Mr. Wilkinson.
So this update builds on what we reviewed last spring and incorporates, I think most importantly, the audited FY25 results that have just been completed. It also factors in some of the items from the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget. And then last, it incorporates the changes that we just discussed in the facility plan. Overall, the district in this projection starts FY26 in a slightly better position. Our actual expenditures last year came in under budget, and it resulted in a surplus of $1.6 million in the operating funds, which was about $100,000 higher than what I was projecting when I did the projection back in May. I know that's projection a lot there, but so we ended up a little bit stronger than we were anticipated, so that'll give us a little bit of a better start as we enter the current fiscal year that we're in right now. So we still have a balanced budget for fiscal year 26, followed by a moderate deficit in fiscal year 2027. So that's been reduced a little bit in this updated projection. We are meeting on a regular basis to analyze our revenues, analyze our expenditures, and start to unpack those and explore what our options are as far as addressing that deficit in fiscal year 27. Fortunately, we have a little bit of time. We're okay for this year, and we don't have that big of a deficit in fiscal year 27. So we have some time to kind of work through these conversations, these discussions. Some opportunities on the revenue side that I think are worth noting. This has been touched on in past meetings, and that's possibly reinstating fees. I think if we reinstated those, we'd generate approximately $230,000 in additional revenue, which would help to close some of that deficit gap. Also, both the projection back in May and then this current projection update assumes that this will be the last year we're leasing to SACID over at Chesterton, or at Sheezer. And so that falling off reduces our revenues by about $175,000. So if SACID would decide to continue for another year, obviously we would continue to get those revenues, and again, it would help offset some of that deficit that we have.
Is there any indication that they will want to lease longer?
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you.
So just touching kind of at a high level of how some of our revenues changed between what I shared in the spring and this October. Overall, over this, what is that, 26, 27, 20, the 5-year time frame, they changed by about $320,000, which isn't significant. Most of those differences were from reducing the transportation proration. I think I mentioned this when I was presenting the fiscal year 25 unaudited results. And as those costs are climbing, not only for us, but other districts in the state, that funding is remaining flat. And so as a result, for every dollar that we spend on transportation, we're actually getting less back from the state because there are not enough funds to account for that increase. And so I started to make some of those changes into our projection to be a little bit more realistic about how much we were going to get back from a transportation reimbursement standpoint. On the positive side, at least from the school district's perspective, we are seeing CPI going up a little bit since our last projection in the spring. And so I think I used 2.9% in this update, and then they actually just released the figures for September, which actually ended up being 3%. So it was slightly higher, but they were delayed in getting that information out this year due to the government shutdown. So I went with what I had at the time, but that is factored into this projection and providing a little bit additional revenue, more revenue over the course of the projection period. I also increased our investment earnings a little bit based on kind of a revised way of handling the budget that I mentioned during the budget cycle. And so that also added a little bit to our revenue stream in this update. As far as expenditures, overall, the outlook has improved a little bit, so that's good. The total projected expenditures for this time period went down by $3.6 million. And that's primarily in the areas of transportation costs. Our transportation costs for this year we just finished up came in a little bit lower than expected, so that's positive. I've been trying to figure out exactly what the costs are in that fund, and it was nice to see our budget actually ended up having a little bit of a surplus in that area. And then it's a little bit of a kind of a reclassification. Our special ed aid costs are kind of getting bounced back and forth between purchase services and tuition. And so last year they were actually in purchase services. This year they're back in tuition as part of the new methodology for how SACID is billing. And so while we saw it go down in the area of purchase services, you can see there's about a $560,000 increase in tuition and fees, and that's primarily those aid costs shifting from one category to the next. But overall, the other piece is salary and benefit projections. Obviously I was able to finalize our budget for fiscal year 26. We saw where the last year ended up, and so we were able to lower those costs a little bit in the salary arena, as well as our benefit renewal. We didn't know what that was going to be during the May projection, and that was finalized at a slightly lower rate, so that obviously helped a little bit over the course of over the projection timeframe. So overall, some favorable things in the areas of the expenditures, which again did help kind of our balanced position for fiscal year '26 and help reduce some of that deficit the following fiscal year. Looking ahead, I always want to mention that we have paused for now anyways, kind of that annual $750,000 that we were saving every year for our facility projects. And so as we continue to revisit the finances, look deeper into that, that's something that we're going to have to kind of look at a little bit more so that we can make sure we have funds available to support our long-term facility needs. The projection also does defer now the bond issuance until fiscal year 2030. We could issue those bonds actually in July of 2029, which would prepare us for the summer of 2030 work. And so that aligns with what I was looking at on the facility plan for the work that we would do at the junior high. But I did have a board member ask very astutely about the difference between the May and October projections. Why did our fund balance at fiscal year 2030, you can't see it here because this is just the operating funds, but when you look at all funds, why was it now 25 million instead of 8 million in the previous one? And that's really the timing of when our bonds would be issued, right at the tail end of that 5-year projection period, but we wouldn't have incurred any of the costs yet because we wouldn't have done the junior high work. So I debated how to put that in there. I'm glad you saw that, Dan, but it gave me the opportunity to explain that, no, our fund balances didn't go up 13 million. We just had the bond proceeds in order to pay for those capital projects in the following summers. So again, overall, the projection kind of reflects a measured approach to the years ahead. And obviously, we still have healthy reserves, which is great. And so that gives us kind of the flexibility and the time that we need to really better understand some of these costs and kind of navigate that into the future. So that's all I had. Don't know if there's any questions or if I've bored everybody to want to move to the next item.
All right, well, moving on from the financial projection update, let's move to the quarterly financial update. That is item 6 in the Finance Committee packet. Once again, Ms. Holkinson.
All right, I got a few more minutes here. So the final item is the quarterly update for kind of the first 3 months of the fiscal year. Again, it looks at our year-to-date revenues and compare those to the budget, which is always a little bit challenging this far into the year, but we can at least touch on a few items to get an idea of where we're at. On the revenue side, as we would expect this time of year, we've received about 98% of our levy. That is typical, and that's what we would expect, and I would also expect to receive the rest of those property taxes over the course of the year. Interest income is right where I want to see it, 1/4 of the annual budget. So far my new methodology for interest income is working excellently. We're also at 26% for our rental income, our corporate personal property taxes. So that's right where we want to be as far as our other local revenues. State revenues are at 14% of budget, and our federal grants are at 26%. These are a little bit more tricky to see where we're at any point in time just because of the uneven nature of when we get those payments, but we haven't started to get those transportation payments yet, so that's why the state revenues are a little bit lower right now, but we will certainly be getting those payments. We probably already have, and we'll continue to get those throughout the rest of the fiscal year. On the expenditure side of things, salary and benefit costs are right on track at 12 and 13% of budget. That's right where they were last year at this time. Purchase services are at 16%, which is trending slightly below last year. But again, this includes transportation, food service, our annual software renews, and then also all of our insurance premiums. So those obviously can vary from one month to the next depending on what those bills are. Supplies and materials are a bit higher at 43% of budget, but that's ultimately reflecting kind of the front-loaded costs that we have at the beginning of the school year. We buy our Chromebooks at the beginning of the school year. We buy curriculum items at the beginning of the school year, and other kind of classroom purchases to get us ready for the start of the year. So we always see that higher in the first quarter, and then it tends to get back towards our budget as we move through the rest of the fiscal year. Capital outlay costs, the $580,000 you're seeing in the update is all related to our junior high HVAC work and renovation of those stairs in the theater. Those are completed, those are behind us, and so those are reflected here in the first quarter. And then also other objects, we always see those higher in the first quarter of the year. They're actually at 45% of budget right now, and that's because SACIT, our special ed cooperative, asks that the districts pay them up front for the entire year, and then it's reconciled and reconciled to what the final enrollments and the final services are at the end of the year. Finally, non-capitalized equipment. This is our staff laptops that were approved at the finance meeting, and then staff laptops for the junior high. And then also, we are doing some new network switches over at the high school, but fortunately, we'll get about 50% of that back through the E-rate process, so we have some funding to help pay for those costs. And so, overall, we're right in line with expectations. Revenues are coming in as planned. Expenditures are consistent with where we would be at in the prior years. And we'll continue to monitor our spending as the year progresses. I'll ask if there's any questions, but I'm guessing there won't be.
Yeah, very thorough. Well, thank you for all your hard work on all the items tonight. Very professional as always. And moving on, we are up to agenda topics for future Finance Committee meetings. Does anyone wish to enter a topic? No? Okay, good. All right, well, with no other agenda items, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, okay, so that's Ms. Allman and Mr. Elderly.
Oh, Kate beat me.
No, we jinxed. You can give it to Dan.
Oh, damn, she jinxed me. I can't talk for the rest of the day.
Well, we'll enter that into parliamentary procedure in the future. All right, so I will adjourn the Finance Committee meeting at 7:22. Thank you very much, everyone.